What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode brought to you by the League FFB. Today, we are going to be going through our top 36 running back rankings and tiers for week 1 of the fantasy football season. We did the wide receiver version of this episode yesterday. It's actually already out on the channel, so if you want to go check that out, I strongly suggest you go check it out after this video. But like I said, today we are going to be talking about the running backs. If this is your first time on the channel, make sure you are subscribed. Want to get you guys fantasy football content all season long, helping you guys win your fantasy football championships. But without wasting any more time, let's hop right into today's video and let's start talking about these running back rankings. So as you guys can see, I already have it pulled up on the screen. We do have our tier maker. Now this does have 7 tiers in order to get through all 36 of these running backs. We are going to be working our way from the top all the way down to the bottom, working from number 1 to number 36. So starting it off in this tier 1, I have 2 running backs here. We will talk about this as the Elite Plus. These are just the elite running backs. And coming in as number 1, it is going to be Christian McCaffrey. Look, he plays against the New York Jets, and it is going to be a tough defense and a tough matchup, but Christian McCaffrey is matchup proof. The volume is going to be there. Some people are going to be a little bit worried about the calf injury, and yes, there probably should be a little bit of worry about Christian McCaffrey as far as the durability, maybe a full workload. It's still something that we're not fading. If you drafted him in your draft, you likely spent the 101 on him. You are starting him, and he still has number 1 overall upside in week 1. I'm still going to keep him here as my number 1 running back. Now, the only other running back in this tier is going to be Bijan Robinson, coming in at the number 2. Now, he plays the Pittsburgh Steelers, and this defense is probably a little bit better than it gets credit for, but I think that this offense is going to run through Bijan Robinson under this new coaching staff. He's likely going to see massive volume, some good goal line opportunities in this, also some good receiving work as well, just kind of getting some dump-offs from Kirk Cousins. A savvy veteran quarterback, they often do like to hit the running back. I think Bijan Robinson has elite upside in week 1 and somebody who has to be in those lineups. Now, let's go on to our tier 2. We do have 3 running backs here. Coming in as my running back 3, I have Breece Hall. Now, the only reason why I don't have him in that tier 1, even though Breece Hall is an elite level talent, he does play the San Francisco 49ers defense, which is one of the best rushing defenses in the NFL. I think that this game is going to be a little bit lower scoring than some people think. It's going to be competitive. We think that this is going to be a very good game. Obviously, the NFL does as well. This is a primetime game. But that being said, I do think Breece Hall, he's going to have the reception upside. He's going to have the touchdown upside. He's still a guy who's in the top 3. We don't have to debate it too much longer, but he's just not going to see the same type of matchups that the guys are in the first tier above him. Now, coming in at running back 4, I am going to have Saquon Barkley. He gets to play against the Green Bay Packers in this game in Brazil, and I do think that Saquon is going to be showcased very early on by this Philadelphia Eagles offense. He is going to probably be a bell cow this week, and he's going to see a lot of work in this offense. He's going to get a lot of the receptions. He's going to get a lot of the goal line opportunities. He is going to be very, very good for fantasy football, and you should be putting him in your starting lineups. Now, going on to the number 5 overall running back, it's going to be Jonathan Taylor, and it's the same situation. This game against the Houston Texans is going to be an interesting one because I do think that the Colts are going to have to prove that they can keep up with this high-paced Houston Texans offense. We know that Shane Steichen, he does play fast. Is he going to be able to play fast enough to keep up with CJ Stroud, Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, Nico Collins, all of these other assets on the Houston Texans offense? We hope so. If he does, Jonathan Taylor is going to be a big part of this game, and I think that Anthony Richardson is going to help kind of open up this run game for Jonathan Taylor more than years past. He's going to be a bell cow, and he's a top 5 option for us here in week 1. Now, let's move on to tier number 3. Tier number 3 is a tier that I'm going to call high upside running back 1s. Now, in this tier, coming in as running back 6, I do have Jahmyr Gibbs. This is going to be one of the highest scoring matchups of the weekend. You have the Lions versus the Los Angeles Rams. You get that good narrative of Jared Goff and Matthew Stafford like we saw on receiver in Netflix. Now, that being said, Jahmyr Gibbs, he was injured in the preseason. He is going to be healthy right now. He did say in a quote recently that he feels like he's about 98 to 100%. I think if that is the case, he's going to see a healthy workload. Obviously, you do worry a little bit at times about David Montgomery stealing some of the goal line touchdowns. But that being said, I don't think Jahmyr Gibbs needs to have a strong goal line type of presence in order to be effective for fantasy football. And we saw that last year down the stretch. He's going to be a PPR monster, and he has big playability. Year 2 is often when we see the breakouts for running backs as well. I expect this game here against the Rams to be a game where Jahmyr Gibbs gets off to a hot start. Now, speaking of another high-paced game, another fast-paced game, we are going to have number 7, Travis Etienne, who is going to play on the road against the Miami Dolphins. The Miami Dolphins, they play play fast. The defense isn't that great. It's kind of a work in progress, I think, at the moment. Obviously, they've added a couple of pieces this offseason from division rival Buffalo with Jordan Poyer now playing at the safety position. But I think Travis Etienne, he's going to be featured. He is going to be the bell cow of this offense. Tank Bigsby is the only other running back in this backfield, and he hasn't necessarily proven himself. I think we can see a very healthy workload and probably goal line opportunities for Travis Etienne in a game where the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to have to score a lot of points if they want to remain competitive. Travis Etienne, he is a high-end running back 1 for our fantasy football rosters here in week 1. Now, coming in at my running back 8, it is going to be Kyren Williams. We go back to that Detroit Lions game. Obviously, there's going to be lots of points to be scored. Some people are freaking out about Kyren Williams right now. I don't think that there's anything to worry about until we see something that we have to worry about. But right now, what I am projecting and what I am expecting from Kyren Williams in week 1 is that heavy workload that he received last year, lots of goal line opportunities, lots of PPR upside. I think Kyren Williams is still a smash running back 1 for fantasy football. And if you drafted him, play him without the worry here in week 1. He is likely going to finish as a running back 1 this week and somebody that I still have as the 8th overall running back in my rankings. And now, as much as I want to get away from some of these other games, we do have this game here with the Miami Dolphins and the Jacksonville Jaguars. As I mentioned, a fast-paced game, a game where there's going to be lots of points being scored. Achane is one of the most electric running backs in the NFL. He can score anytime that he touches the football. And one thing that they've talked about this offseason that I think we're going to get to see a little bit more in week 1 is just the quickness, the fast play that they have in this play style. They do a lot of pre-snap motions, and in those motions, you're getting to see Achane move around the field a little bit more. But one thing they've talked about a little bit more specifically is they want to use Achane in the receiving game. And if he starts getting used a little bit more downfield, we could see some major PPR upside and actually a guy that can break fantasy football just because of the speed that he has and the opportunity that he has in front of him. I still think Raheem Mostert is going to be involved. He's not necessarily something that I think should make us fade Achane because Achane doesn't need a ton of touches to be effective for our fantasy football teams. Now I'm going to move on to tier 4, and tier 4 has quite a handful of running backs. And I think all of these guys kind of are going to be flirting with that low-end running back 1, that high-end running back 2 type of volume. And that's why I'm going to call these guys just fringe running back 1s. Any of these guys can finish anywhere along that spectrum, but these are the guys coming in at my running back 10. I do have Derrick Henry. It is no question that Derrick Henry is going to be used as a goal line monster in this offense. He's going to be used very heavily in this offense that wants to run the football. I think Derrick Henry, the volume, the opportunity that he has in front of him, especially in this matchup against the Kansas City Chiefs, they're going to have to score points to keep up. It's going to be competitive. It's going to be a fun game. Now, I will say that even though the over is still fairly high, projected by Vegas for the game total, I do think this game is likely going under, but that is probably because I am projecting them to run the football a little bit more than Vegas is actually projecting at the moment. But that's going to be good for Derrick Henry, so we are going to keep him here as my running back 10. Now, staying in this game, my running back 11 is Isiah Pacheco, and it's kind of the same thing. We saw Andy Reid last year. He was leaning on Pacheco down the stretch. I do think this game is going under. I do think that this game is going to be run heavy and no Hollywood Brown in this matchup. Yes, Mahomes is still going to throw for quite a few yards. He's going to still have Travis Kelce. He's going to have Rashee Rice, but they're going to lean on the run game, and Isiah Pacheco is going to be a big part of that. Samaje Perine is going to be utilized in this matchup. We know he's going to be suiting up. How utilized he's going to be, still TBD. I think they're still going to lean on Pacheco, and if he does receive pass catching opportunities in this offense here in week 1, I think his ceiling is going to be even higher than where I have him ranked. So right now at running back 11, I feel very comfortable with that. I think he has RB1 upside here in week 1. Now going on to my 12th overall running back, I have Rachaad White. Now he plays a game against the Washington Commanders, and really the only good part of this Washington Commanders defense is going to be the interior part of their defensive line. But we know that Rachaad White, he is used as a weapon all around the field in the receiving game, in the rushing game. I'm not going to be worried about Bucky Irving at this point in the season. Some people are going to like Bucky Irving maybe later down the year. I think they'll lean on Rachaad White this week, and I think he still can perform as a running back 1 in a matchup where they're likely going to be winning and leading for a majority of the game against a bad defense. Now coming in at my running back 13, I do have Kenneth Walker for the Seattle Seahawks, and this is a matchup against the Denver Broncos, and this is another defense that isn't going to be that great. It's going to be a game where I am projecting the Seattle Seahawks to win this one, and they could win it quite easily, especially in the second half when they're going to be leaning on the running game, feeding Kenneth Walker. We've heard a lot of rumbling about a larger workload for Kenneth Walker in this offense, and I do think that he has RB1 upside here this week. That's why he's going to be here in this tier 4 for me. And with that being said, I'm not very worried about Zach Charbonnet at this point in his career. I know that Charbonnet, he was kind of drafted highly. That was a different coaching staff. That was a different regime. I think he is merely a handcuff to Kenneth Walker at this point, and this is Kenneth Walker's backfield. Now, coming in at running back 14, I do have James Cook of the Buffalo Bills. This offense is kind of in flux. They're going to need to figure out their identity, and we actually did an episode on the BDGE channel today where we talked about these running backs, and when I came home, I moved James Cook in my rankings. James Cook was a couple spots down earlier in my rankings today. I moved him up. Nick kind of sold me on the idea. This is a bad Arizona Cardinals defense. They are going to lean on James Cook while they're figuring out the wide receiver room. I know that there's probably going to be a chance that Josh Allen steals some of these goal line touchdowns. I think he's going to get enough receptions. I think he's going to get enough volume that we can still feel comfortable with him. I think he's more of a high-end running back 2, but he could still have that running back 1 ceiling if things go his right way, if he does fall into the end zone, but somebody that we can still feel comfortable with playing this week. Now, coming in at my running back 15, I have Josh Jacobs. He does get to play in this matchup in Brazil against the Philadelphia Eagles. This Philadelphia Eagles defense is a very good defense. There's a chance that we don't see much of Marshawn Lloyd in this matchup. We may not even see him at all. Josh Jacobs should see the majority of the carries. I think it's going to be 50-50 on whether or not he falls into the end zone. If he does, he's going to have a good day. If he doesn't, he's probably a guy that likely is only going to be scoring somewhere between 10 and 12 points for our lineups, which will make him more of a running back 2. I think Josh Jacobs, he has the ceiling this week. Will he get it in this game? This game kind of has some bad vibes around it. I'm not necessarily sticking away from it, but as you see, Josh Jacobs, running back 15 in my rankings this week, somebody we can rely on, but maybe not somebody that's going to have week winning upside here in this matchup against the Philadelphia Eagles. And then as the last running back here in this fringe running back 1 tier, I am going to have Joe Mixon. We talked about this matchup with the Indianapolis Colts. It's going to be fast-paced. There's going to be lots of scoring opportunities in it. We do think that Joe Mixon is going to have the full workload here in Houston. There's really nobody behind him that's going to spell him. Dameon Pierce, but his kind of experiment hasn't worked out well here in Houston. They brought Joe Mixon in to be a bell cow. I think he still has juice. He is going to be a guy that I think still has the ability to finish as an RB1 this week if he gets into the end zone once. If he gets into it twice, forget about it. He's probably a top 5 play. But at the end of the day, Joe Mixon, a very safe running back 2 with some RB1 upside here in this matchup. But now let's move on to my tier 5. Tier 5 is going to be these RB2s for fantasy football, and kicking it off at 17, this is going to be Alvin Kamara. Now, he gets this matchup against the Carolina Panthers. This is going to be a low-scoring game, a very boring game, and there is a chance that Alvin Kamara is going to get some of that goal line opportunity vultured by Taysom Hill. It's not necessarily a great situation to be in. I think Alvin Kamara, the talent is still there. He's just missing a little bit of the juice that he once had, and the offense is changing. He may not see all of those dump-offs that he's seen in years past. It's still Derek Carr, so that could still happen, I guess. But at the end of the day, this is not necessarily a great matchup, and it's not necessarily the type of scoring opportunities that you're going to want to see out of a guy like Alvin Kamara to have a high-end week. And that being said, I just have him as a running back 2 in my rankings, coming in as my running back 17. Now, coming in as my running back 18, I do have David Montgomery for the Detroit Lions, and he is going to have more goal line opportunities than a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs in this matchup against the Rams. Like I said, it's going to be high scoring, but he probably doesn't have the PPR upside, and he doesn't have as much juice as a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs. I think he can still have a very solid day, but he becomes a little bit more of a touchdown-dependent option long-term in this offense. I think he can get it in this game. There is a chance that he does get into the end zone with as many scoring opportunities as we are projecting for this matchup. That being said, think of him as a running back 2. If you get more from him than that, I'm definitely happy about it, obviously, but that being said, he is my running back 18 in my rankings. Now, coming in as my running back 19, I have James Conner. James Conner in this matchup, this is going to be one of my favorite matchups I think that I'm going to watch all weekend. We do have the Cardinals versus the Buffalo Bills. They do go on the road. They are going to be playing in Buffalo. This Buffalo defense isn't as tough as it has been in years past, and I do expect James Conner to get a majority of the workload. I think he is almost a lock to get into the end zone. In fact, over on Underdog Pick'ems, I did choose the higher on the touchdown play there for James Conner, but I do think that he's going to get the majority of this workload, and he is going to be a safe kind of running back 2 for our fantasy football teams. Now, running back 20 for me is going to be Raheem Mostert. We talked about it with Devin Achane. This is going to be a competitive game, a high-scoring game. Mostert probably is going to get some goal line carries as well. I think this is a split backfield. Mostert just doesn't have as much juice as a guy like Devin Achane, so his ceiling isn't as high, but I wouldn't be surprised if he does get the majority of the goal line carries in this offense. We already saw them do that with him last year. If he gets 1 or 2 goal line opportunities, we could be looking at a guy who finishes as an RB1 this week, but it is likely going to have to take the touchdowns for him to pay off big. That being said, coming in as a running back 2. I think he's a fine play for us in fantasy, but nobody that I'm just rushing to put into my lineup if I do have some of these better options. Now, coming in at running back 21, I have Aaron Jones and the Minnesota Vikings, and this matchup against the New York Giants isn't necessarily the greatest matchup. That defensive line for the New York Giants is actually the strong point of their defense, so it's going to be a little bit harder to run against them. That being said, Aaron Jones is going to have some pass catching upside, so in a full point PPR league, maybe a half point PPR league, you are going to have the ability to get those types of points, and maybe you do get a goal line carrier too. I think that this is going to be a game where it's probably going to be competitive throughout the whole thing, so you do have that going for you as far as game script goes, but I just think the ceiling is a little bit capped in this offense, and I do think that Aaron Jones' best days are probably behind him, so we're not looking at a running back with the same juice that he had in years past. That said, safe running back 2 for us here this week. Now, coming in at running back 22, I do have DeAndre Swift. He gets to play against the Tennessee Titans, and this is a matchup actually that I do kind of like for DeAndre Swift. I think they're going to get him involved pretty early in the receiving game. We do think that this is a game where the Chicago Bears can win this fairly easily. I do expect them to get ahead and maybe even lean on the running game later as this game progresses, but is that going to be with Swift on the field, or are they going to bring in other guys like Roschon Johnson and Khalil Herbert? I think that's probably a risk in this matchup. I also don't know if DeAndre Swift is necessarily the goal line back for them here in this offense either. Going to have to take a big player too. Think of him more as a low-end running back 2 in your lineups this week until we get to see a little bit more about this Chicago Bears offense, but that's why he's coming in for me as my running back 22. And now the last player in this tier, it's going to be Najee Harris. Najee Harris does get to play against the Atlanta Falcons, and I think we get to see the Arthur Smith bell cow type of running back in this offense. Jaylen Warren is probably going to play. Is he going to be 100%? I think that's going to be a question that we're going to find out very quickly. Najee Harris, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets 15, 20 carries in this game. If he does, he's going to have to get into the end zone for us to have a big day. This is still a Pittsburgh Steelers line that isn't that great. They're improved from what they were last year, but they're still not great, and Najee has still been a little bit inefficient at the NFL level. I think we're going to see a low-end running back 2 type of week out of him, but if Jaylen Warren is healthier than we expect, I think Najee Harris could see his ceiling capped in this matchup. Now, moving on to tier 6, this is going to be the running back 3s. So if you have the 2 running back starts, maybe you're looking at this guy in your flex. If you have more than that, here's a running back 3 for you. But I do think coming in as 24, it is going to be Rhamondre Stevenson for me. Now, this is a matchup where I don't feel great for the Patriots. They are going to be playing against the Cincinnati Bengals on the road. They are projected to lose this game by the largest margin of the weekend. So could they get away from the run game very quickly? Maybe. If they do start kind of leaning on the pass game, is Rhamondre Stevenson going to be involved heavily, or are they going to lean on Antonio Gibson? I think that's a question as well. This feels like a very risky play. Could he still get a goal line carrier too and maybe, fall into the end zone in garbage time? Possibly. That's probably what it's going to need to take for him to save his day, but this is a very risky play and somebody that I'm probably avoiding if I can. Now, coming in as my running back 25, I have Javonte Williams, and we talked about the Sean Payton Broncos in one of our last episodes and how they like to target the running back position. I think Javonte Williams is going to see a lot of checkdowns in this offense. He should have some PPR upside. We need to see him be healthy. Is he going to get some goal line carries? I don't know. This is likely a matchup where they're probably going to be playing from behind for a majority of the game. That also might lead to a negative game script for a guy like Javonte Williams. We think that the Seattle offense is going to be much improved, likely scoring some more points here under Ryan Grubb. I think Javonte Williams is a guy that I can play in my lineups if I need him, but if I have some of these other guys in tier 5 or above, you're obviously leaning with them over a guy like Javonte Williams. Now, moving on to running back 26, I do have Zamir White. This is a game against the Los Angeles Chargers. They are going to be playing on the road. It's going to be slow paced. It's going to be kind of ugly. It's going to be a low scoring game. It's not necessarily a game that I want to invest in. I'm not sold on this Raiders offense. I kind of just want to wait and see what we can get out of them first before I'm confidently throwing Zamir White in my lineup, and because of that, he's coming in as my running back 26 this week. Now, coming in at running back 27, I have Jerome Ford of the Cleveland Browns. He plays against the Dallas Cowboys, so a little bit of a tougher matchup for him. He should still get the volume, and he should still have some PPR upside, but it's just not a great matchup for him, so because of that, he's more so just a running back 3. Now, coming in at running back 28, I do have Tony Pollard. I do project him to probably get the majority of the work in this offense, and when I say majority, I mean probably like 55%, 60% majority of the work in this offense. It's going to be a split backfield with Tajay Spears. This matchup against the Chicago Bears is sneaky. I do think the Chicago Bears are one of the better defensive plays this week in fantasy football, and that being said, I think it's going under the radar how tough of a matchup this could be for Tony Pollard. He's likely a guy that I'm not going to be playing in my lineups if I don't have to. I'd much rather wait and see what this offense looks like before I'm confidently throwing him in my lineup. Now, coming in as my running back 29, We do have another player in Devin Singletary who gets to play against the Minnesota Vikings. This Vikings defense isn't great. It's a little bit more improved on the defensive line, especially with the addition of Dallas Turner on this defense. It should be a little bit better under Brian Flores here for another year in Minnesota. But that being said, Devin Singletary, he should see the majority of the work in this backfield. He should probably get a couple goal line carries in here. He's more of a guy that you're going to be playing because he's going to get volume, but he still kind of feels like a landmine in week one until we get to see what this Giants offense looks like, because it could still look very bad under Daniel Jones. And that being said, probably somebody that I'm avoiding, and he's more so this low-end running back 3 for fantasy football this week. And then the last player in this running back 3 tier that I would even consider putting in my lineup would probably be Brian Robinson of the Washington Commanders. Now, he gets to play against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, they do have a good interior defensive line as well, and he probably is not going to get a lot of the receiving work because they've added Austin Eckler to this backfield as well. But I do think that there's going to be some scoring opportunities for him in this game. He does profile to be the better goal line back, and he should still see some volume. We've talked about Cliff Kingsbury, and we've talked about this offense looking better with Jaden Daniels under center as well. Maybe this is going to be good things for Brian Robinson long term, just not something that I'm going to be betting on here in week one. Because of that, he comes in as my running back 30. Now, we are getting quite far down the list. We are going to go to tier 7. Tier 7 is mainly just flex plays if you need to play these guys, and I'm not going to talk about them very long, but we'll kind of pull them all up here. 31 is going to be Zach Moss, 32 Chuba Hubbard, 33 Jalen Warren, 34 Gus Edwards, 35 Chase Brown, and 36 is going to be Tajay Spears. Now, all of these guys, except for maybe Chuba Hubbard, I feel very uncomfortable throwing into my lineup because we can't really project what these backfields are going to look like going into week one until we get to see them. That being said, I do think that Zach Moss is probably the better play if you are going to play somebody from the Bengals backfield. As I mentioned, this game against the New England Patriots, it's likely a game that they're going to be leading very much in the second half. And if that is the case, they're going to lean on a guy like Zach Moss to kind of grind out this clock. So you can play him in a pinch if you need to. The same can be said about Chuba Hubbard. With Jonathan Brooks injured and this matchup against the New Orleans Saints, they're probably going to lean on Hubbard here in this offense. And Dave Canales has a history of making the running backs look good. Just look at what he did with Rachaad White last year. Now, Jalen Warren, we talked about him being a little bit injured. I'm probably waiting and seeing what Jalen Warren does here in week one before I'm throwing him in my lineups. That being said, with Gus Edwards, Chase Brown, and Tajay Spears, these are complementary pieces, I think, in an offense that I'm just not super confident in at the moment in projecting the actual output until we get to see some snap shares and some actual game film from these guys in an actual regular season game. But these are guys that you can throw in a flex if you have them in a pinch, but probably guys you're not going to need here this week because it's week one. And you shouldn't have a lot of injuries. You shouldn't have a lot of need to kind of dive deep into your lineup. So these guys can most likely be left on your bench in most league formats. So there you have it. That's my top 36 running backs here in week one of the NFL season. We are going to be doing my starts of the week here tomorrow. Some AMAs, start sit streams, all this other stuff throughout the rest of the weekend. So as I mentioned at the top of this video, if you haven't watched the wide receivers, go watch that video. We talk in depth about the top 36 wide receivers here in week one, and that video is a must-see if you haven't seen it already. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. That way you never miss any future content, and hit that like button for me while you're down there. Just the best free way to show this channel some support. And as I mentioned, it doesn't cost you anything, and it helps us grow a ton. So hit that like button while you're at it. Last but not least, go join my Discord. I do have a Discord linked in the description. It's free to join. I'm in there helping you guys with fantasy football questions all year long. Start sits, trades, waivers, all of that stuff. That's the best way to get some advice from me. And like I said, free to join, so go join that Discord. That being said, I have nothing else for you today, so I will see you on our next video. But until then, peace out.